Oh, you think you know your neighbors, right? Well, I thought I did too. Until that day, I heard the screams coming from next door. What I discovered made me realize I never really knew them at all. I lived in a quiet suburb, you know the type. Picket fences, manicured lawns, the whole deal. The Johnsons next door seemed normal enough. We'd wave, chat about the weather, that sort of thing. But then, weird stuff started happening. It began with noises at night. Not your usual television sounds or music, but muffled thumps and crashes. I tried to ignore it, but it kept getting worse. Then I noticed Mr. Johnson always looked tired, jumpy even. Mrs. Johnson stopped tending her garden and the curtains were always drawn. I kept telling myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild, but deep down, I knew something was off. Should I mind my own business or dig deeper? Little did I know, that decision would change everything. The chilling discovery. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong next door. The weird noises kept getting louder and more frequent. One night, I heard what sounded like furniture being thrown around. My heart was racing as I pressed my ear against the wall, trying to make sense of the chaos. The next day, I noticed Mrs. Johnson had a bruise on her cheek when she was getting the mail. She avoided eye contact and hurried back inside. That's when I knew I had to do something. I started paying closer attention, watching their house like a hawk. Mr. Johnson's car would leave at odd hours, and sometimes I'd see shadowy figures moving behind the curtains late at night. It was like living next to a horror movie. Then it happened. One quiet afternoon, I heard the most blood-curdling scream coming from their house. It was so loud and terrifying that I dropped the book I was reading and froze in panic. My mind was racing. What the hell was going on over there? Without thinking, I ran outside and up to their front door. I could hear more screams and crashes inside. My hand was shaking as I reached for the doorknob. It was unlocked. I burst in, calling out, "Hello, is everyone okay?" The house was a mess, furniture overturned, and there was a trail of blood leading upstairs. I followed it, my heart pounding in my ears. At the top of the stairs, I saw a door slightly ajar. I pushed it open and, oh my God, I couldn't believe my eyes. There was Mr. Johnson, standing over his wife with a bloody knife. But that wasn't even the worst part. Behind them was a hidden door, wide open, revealing a small room. And inside, I saw faces, terrified faces, of people I'd never seen before, chained to the walls. I stood there, frozen in shock. Mr. Johnson turned to me, his eyes wild and crazed. In that moment, I realized I never really knew my neighbors at all. And now, I was face to face with a monster. The aftermath and consequences. The moment I saw those terrified faces, I knew my life would never be the same. My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my phone to call 911. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the scene in front of me. Mr. Johnson still holding that bloody knife, his wife on the floor, and those poor people chained up like animals. It felt like hours, but the cops showed up in minutes. Sirens blaring, lights flashing. Our quiet little neighborhood turned into a crime scene straight out of a television show. I watched in a daze as they hauled Mr. Johnson away in cuffs. He didn't even struggle, just had this creepy blank look on his face. The next few days were a blur of police interviews and news vans. Turns out the Johnsons had been kidnapping people for years. The cops found evidence of even more victims who didn't make it. Our picture-perfect suburb was suddenly infamous, plastered all over the news. I couldn't sleep for weeks after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those faces in that hidden room. I'd wake up in a cold sweat thinking I heard screams next door, but it was just my mind playing tricks on me. The neighborhood changed after that. People started putting up security cameras and extra locks. We used to leave our doors unlocked, but now everyone was paranoid. Block parties and neighborhood barbecues became a thing of the past. Nobody trusted each other anymore. I catch myself watching my other neighbors now, wondering what secrets they might be hiding. That nice old lady across the street? What if she has bodies buried in her rose garden? The family with the 3 kids down the block, are those really their kids? I know it's crazy, but I can't help it. That day showed me that you never really know what's going on behind closed doors. Sometimes the monsters aren't hiding under the bed. They're living right next door, waving to you as they mow their lawn. A new perspective on neighborly vigilance. After everything that happened, I couldn't look at my neighborhood the same way. It's like a veil was lifted, and I saw how little we actually knew about the people living right next to us. But I learned some big lessons from this whole messed up situation. The biggest thing? Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. But that doesn't mean you gotta go full paranoid mode on everyone. It's more about being aware, like actually talk to your neighbors, get to know them, build a real community. I'm not saying spy on people or anything creepy like that, just pay attention. If you notice something weird, speak up. Don't just ignore it and hope it goes away, because sometimes the scariest monsters are hiding in plain sight, behind picture-perfect smiles and manicured lawns.